Good afternoon or good morning, wherever you are, and welcome to the QEM Heroes webinar series. I'm Christine Wood, and I serve as the Assistant Program Director for the Heroes Fellows Program at QEM. For more than 30 years, QEM has been a national catalyst for STEM education transformation and research capacity building. Currently, the QEM network serves nearly 900 colleges and universities and reaches more than 8,000 individuals nationwide. This webinar is part of the HEROES initiative. The HEROES program brings together researchers with experience in the federal government to lend their expertise and support to the STEM research and education communities. Our fellows are here to provide tools and tips for navigating the funding landscape, developing STEM programs and partnerships, and improving talent retention in in-demand fields. We hope this series promotes engagement with our HEROES fellows and provides valuable resources to our participants. During this webinar, we invite you to use the Q&A tool to ask questions, and we'll address those questions at the end of the presentation. And the webinar recordings and slides will be available in the QEM Resource Hub. By attending this webinar, you will be added to the QEM network and granted access to the Resource Hub. And I'm so happy to introduce our presenters today. Dr. Quincy Brown is the Principal of Futures and Innovation, leading education and workforce strategic development and advising. With more than 25 years of experience in engineering and technology, she specializes in STEM education and workforce development. Most recently, Quincy served as Director of Space STEM and Workforce Policy in the White House National Space Council. Her career includes senior policy roles across two presidencies in the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, Senior Director for Innovation Research at AnitaB.org, Program Director for STEM Education Research at the American Association for the Advancement of Science, and Computer Science Professor at Bowie State University. Quincy holds a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering and master's and doctoral degrees in computer science. Ken Wright retired from NASA after 40 years of federal service, where he most recently served as a senior policy advisor in the Office of Technology, Policy, and Strategy. Other roles during his career included director of the NASA Inventions and Contributions Board, executive director for the Science and Technology Partnerships Forum, and agency lead for innovation. Ken also served 2 years in the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, where he led the National Science and Technology Council and lab to market activities. Career highlights include receiving NASA's Outstanding Leadership and Exceptional Service Medals and being inducted into the Academy of Distinguished Alumni for Virginia Tech College of Industrial and Systems Engineering. So without further ado, I will turn the floor over to our presenters.
Awesome. Thank you. I will share my screen. Good.
Good.
Okay. All right. Over to you, Ken.
All right. Well, thanks, Christine. And thank you all for joining us. We have a lot of information we're going to try to get to you today, primarily associated with these non-traditional partnerships and, leveraging the experience that we have so far. We're going to start talking about the types of partnerships that are out there, get some examples of specific partners and some strategic takeaways because, these partnerships are part of your overall strategy if you do this thing right. So before we get started into that, maybe Christine, you can bring up our poll just so we know who's on the call today. So which career position best describes you? If you could just take a second just to do that so we can kind of get a feel for who we have on in the audience in the webinar, even though we know it's going to be recorded for others. It gives us a feel for where we can target things during our discussion today. And Christine, just let us know when it's ready.
I'll give participants just a few moments to finish the poll.
All right. That's great because, one of the things about partnerships, it takes everyone really working together. So this gives us a nice feel for the balance of folks here today, and we can kind of go from there. So with that, we're just going to talk a little bit about what do we even mean by non-traditional partnerships. And typically we're talking about activities here that are supporting the teaching, learning, and research through federal partnerships. So this is not just about providing a product to the federal government, but actually a true partnership. And typically, these are things that aren't covered by the federal acquisition regulations, lovingly known as the FAR. A lot of the procurements that are done with federal agencies are covered by the FAR. So we're going to concentrate on some of these ones that aren't to give a lot more flexibility and some things that improve efficiencies in terms of creating these partnerships. So with that, I want to turn over to Dr. Brown, who's going to give you some background in it.
Thank you. So, as Ken mentioned, there's this thing called the FAR you may or may not have heard of, but as you do more of this work, especially engaging with the federal government, the word you might hear the FAR. And what that is a short for the Federal Acquisition Regulation, affectionately known as the FAR. This is the principal set of rules that govern federal procurement for the country. There's a great website, acquisition.gov. We've put links here and throughout the slides for you to download later, but you can go to acquisition.gov to access the FAR and read in great detail all the things. But basically, this is what covers contracts by like the military, by agencies, including NASA, that benefit the federal government, right? And so the purpose of the FAR is to create these uniform policies and procedures that departments and agencies follow when going through procurement. They are governed by a FAR council, which includes NASA, DoD, and GSA, which is the General Services Administration. And then I don't say all, but many of the federal departments and agencies have supplements to the FAR that kind of detail and describe the specific slight changes or additional authorities that a particular department or agency might have. And so like NASA, Energy, Health, HHS, Health and Human Services, USDA, many of the other departments and agencies have supplements to the FAR. And it's important to know that the FAR does not cover grants, right? Because grants support a public purpose. And the FAR covers contracts, which are done for the benefit of the federal government. So that's like a difference there. And so, as I mentioned, grants and contracts, just a little bit of a side-by-side comparison, where grants are typically awards that support specific projects or initiatives, and they're usually provided on the basis of merit, and there is not an expectation that they provide a direct benefit to the government, right? They generally offer flexibility in how the funds are used, provided that they stay within the general guides and bounds of the overall project that was approved. And they're generally used for scientific research, for teaching, infrastructure development, community service, and the primary goal is about advancing knowledge, education, and public service. These are different from contracts because contracts are agreements that are generally created to provide goods and services that directly benefit the government or fulfill a government need, right? And so, as again, grants are around like public benefit and public service. There's not an expectation of a direct benefit to the government, where contracts are actually created to provide a direct benefit to the government. They tend to have more specifications, stricter terms, conditions, guidelines, descriptions of deliverables, and they're often used when the federal government needs to acquire something specific. And this could be research, right? It could be a piece of technology or some other direct service, but it's much more constrained and directly for the benefit of the government compared to a grant. There are also agreements that are called cooperative agreements, right? These are similar to grants in that they are designed to carry out the purpose of a public purpose of support to enable R&D projects. And the difference between cooperative agreements and grants is that there is this expectation that the federal department or agency will be substantially involved in the actual work itself, right? With a grant, the federal agency is primarily the funder, right? And with a cooperative agreement, that entity is expected to actually partner in the research, not just fund it. So that's a bit of a difference between the cooperative agreements and grants. The other thing I want to touch on is another bit of terminology that you may or may not have heard is about primes. These are versus subawards, right? There are a couple different words you may hear that mean similar, pretty much the same thing, but you may hear about a prime or a lead or an awardee, right? And these are the entities that play the most important role, and they have the primary responsibility for the project's execution. These happen on contracts, but they also happen on grants. This entity is the one that is responsible for managing the entire project, the planning, the execution, the monitoring, the reporting, the closing, right? And they are the ones that maintain the direct communication with the funder. There are also then subs, right? Sometimes they're just referred to as subs, whether it's a subgrant or a subaward, right? And these are entities that are hired or contracted or entered into an agreement of some sort by the prime or the awardee or the lead to do a specific part of the work, right? And there's no direct contractual relationship between the sub and the funder, right? The relationship is between the prime or the lead or the awardee and then the sub-awardee. And these generally happen through MOUs or contracts. It depends on your institution or organization, what type of vehicle and the work that needs to be done. But it's an agreement between the sub and the lead instead of the sub and the funder. So there's something else called other transaction authorities. And so we mentioned, contracts, grants, cooperative agreements, but there are these things called OTAs, which stands for other transaction authorities, that allow agencies and departments to enter into, as it says, other transactions, right, that are not grants. They are not cooperative agreements. They are not contracts. And so therefore, these types of agreements are not required to comply with the FAR, right? They can use non-traditional review or award management practices, kind of how they are managed, and the specifics of the particular OTA will depend on exactly what the project is about and the department or agency. And each of these I've listed here, I think there are about 10 departments and agencies that have their own other transaction authorities, and they each have their own guidance. And so this particular one that you may fall under or you may be interested in, you'll have to go, there's a site that I listed there that has a very comprehensive list of all of the departments and some of the agencies within a department that have the OTAs, and it has links to the specific reg. And so you can read that, or your contracting officer can read that to learn more about the specific one for a particular part of the federal government. Next, I want to just cover a few of the non-FAR agreement types. So again, under the OTA, one is called a CRADA. These are cooperative research and development agreements, and these are relationships with federal labs that are really focused on commercialization. So they're partnerships that allow the federal labs to collaborate with other federal agencies or state and local governments, industry, nonprofits, universities, right? And this is a way to facilitate federal lab developed inventions or IP to make their way through the commercialization and tech transfer process. And in this case, the government does not necessarily contribute funds, but they may contribute in other types of resources. And Ken will talk a little bit more, I believe, about a CRADA, an example of a CRADA. There are also PIAs, which are partnership intermediary agreements. And these are contracts or MOUs between a federal lab and a nonprofit or state or local government. And they, again, are focused on connecting federal technology to industry to accelerate tech transfer, licensing, commercialization. And this is not, again, about procurement, which is why this is not part of the traditional agreements covered under the FAR, but this is really about research, tech transfer, versus like the purchase of goods and services by the government for the benefit of the government. The last one I'll just kind of give a nod to are called TIAs. These are technology investment agreements, primarily used by the Department of Energy and Department of Defense. when the research objectives are unlikely to be achieved using other types of agreements. Again, this is, you can the links that we shared earlier will have a lot more detail, or your contracting office or officer at your institution or at the agency will be able to tell you a lot more. But unlike the FAR, right, contracts, these do allow for IP and data rights to be transferred or leveraged in ways that are more similar to commercial industry than the way the federal government typically does it. And it does involve government technical and management, right? They're involved in this in a slightly different way than is again in a grant or a cooperative agreement or a contract. And then I will wrap up by just kind of going over some high level kind of steps, right? Not to be prescriptive, but to say that, as you're going through and understanding, identifying potential partnerships and collaborations, you really want to think about who you want to partner with, right? And see and then be sure that they have complementary skills, resources, or even sometimes it's a presence, right? If there's an entity you want to partner with, they may have a strong relationship with the funder that you are looking to develop a relationship with. And so that in and of itself may be part of your reason and rationale for wanting to partner with them. You should also really think about your value proposition, and not just the value proposition or the benefit for that partner, but really think about you and your organization, and understand what is it that might be beneficial to your classroom or your lab or your campus, right? Beyond, people may approach you to partner, and they can tell you all about why they want you to partner, but this is an opportunity for you to think about why you want to partner and what there is in it for you, so that there's a value on both sides, right? It's not a one-sided relationship. I think the other piece here that's really important, that regardless of what type of vehicle you use, that you develop formal agreements, right? That really, really do define the roles, the responsibilities, and the deliverables. Again, as you enter into these agreements or relationships, I should say, it's not all about, what they can do for you or you can do for them. It's what you all are doing for each other. And sometimes making sure that on the outset, you have all of those things defined will make sure that, as the project grows on and takes on a life of its own, and the natural twists and turns of research and development, things come up, right? And if roles haven't been defined, if responsibilities haven't been defined clearly on the beginning, it can lead to sometimes some confusion. And so you want to, as much as possible, get that cleared up, get down to the deliverables, be clear about who's responsible for what, especially as it can relate to the grant proposal, the contract, or the cooperative agreement that will describe what the deliverables are and the timeline is. And then think about also networks, right? These are partnerships and relationships. And so each entity entering into these types of agreements is part of a network. And as you get back to the first piece, think about identifying potential partners, think about their network. A network is also being a resource, right? There are people or organizations in that network that might have insights that are valuable and important to you, and think about how you can leverage those and capitalize on those as part of this relationship or collaboration. I want to also highlight a really great resource here. This is called the Federal Contracting Playbook. This was developed with a set of representatives from HBCUs. This was it has a bit of a space focus. So this was part of my work at the National Space Council in collaboration with the White House Initiative on HBCUs. And it was done through an effort that brought together HBCUs, industry, space industry in particular, and federal departments and agencies to really talk through not just the challenges with regarding federal contracting, but like the opportunities and the solutions. And so it's a very dense book. I guess it's a book, it's a PDF, that is not HBCU specific, though that was kind of the origins of it. And it has a lot of information, a lot of definitions, a lot of links to federal regulations, a lot of, it describes some of the challenges that actual faculty or institutions have developed, have encountered, and then what the solutions were. So I want to make sure to, share that out. And again, the link for this will be in the slides for you to download afterwards. And now Ken will share some partnership examples.
Thanks, Quincy. And again, this is about specific examples we have both from NASA as well as some of the different agencies I interfaced with during my time at the White House. And there are some open opportunities here. So be looking out. There are actually some things that are open right now for being able to answer solicitations or opportunities for these partnerships. So let's start off with why does NASA even engage in these partnerships? Everybody's seen Artemis 2 is going well, but this is only one of many, many missions that NASA is currently involved with. And this includes the first A in NASA is aeronautics, which everybody forgets about. But it actually is a lot of things both on the aeronautics and space side of things. And so NASA really is facilitating these opportunities for domestic and international partnerships because they need to be able to accomplish their mission objectives. And this includes helping NASA resolve many gaps in technical capabilities. We know that we've heard just from Artemis, there's some things that still aren't quite resolved, some things not quite going well. I'm not going to talk about the toilet, but there are lots of different things out there that need to be resolved in terms of technical capabilities and gaps. One of the key things that NASA and all the federal agencies also are involved with is how do we make sure that we are maximizing the value in terms of economic impact from the federal agencies. And there's actually, I'll talk a little bit about the federal lab to market activity in a little bit later, but they're all involved with things to help stimulate economy and help the nation continue its leadership in the economic realm as well. And this is also a tool for helping NASA meeting their mandates for fullest commercial use of space. That we didn't know that there is actually a mandate for NASA to make sure that the agency is not just doing things themselves, but also stimulating the space economy. And then looking to really how we maintain essential NASA expertise and facilities. A lot of expertise is out there and a lot of facilities are out there. And there are opportunities to utilize both the expertise and the facilities during these partnerships. And then we talked last time about the work-based learning opportunities in the STEM education area. And so really advancing NASA STEM education and outreach goals as part of the partnership activity as well. So who does NASA partner with? Basically everybody. Well, not everybody, because we know we've got some things that are sensitive, but U.S. industry, other federal agencies, research institutions, of course, public outreach organizations such as museums, the state and local governments, colleges and universities, and this includes community colleges with even more emphasis on community colleges these days, foreign entities, as well as professional associations and nonprofits. So not quite everybody, but lots of folks that NASA partners with. And that's because each of these partners brings a different perspective. And I think that's one of the key things to true partnerships is identifying that value proposition, as Quincy mentioned earlier, and be able to communicate that value proposition throughout the partnership process. NASA has lots of different procurement mechanisms. I'm going to just concentrate on the last two on these in this particular chart. They have the traditional procurement contracts, such as the FAR, and these activities are required to directly benefit the federal government if you're doing a traditional contract. Grants and cooperative agreements, as Quincy mentioned earlier, also support a public purpose, and they are another mechanism that NASA uses. But the main one I'm going to concentrate on for the next few slides is under the OTA, the Other Transactional Authority, which really supports the needs of the partner. And if you're fortunate, it should also support the needs of the federal agency or NASA, and it achieves these mutual goals. So the most common OTA that NASA uses is the Space Act Agreement. And this was specifically developed for NASA and authorized by the NASA Aeronautics and Space Act of 1958. And it gives NASA some flexibilities in terms of these agreements that a lot of the other agencies don't have because of the unique challenges that NASA faces and the type and the specific activities associated with the SAA. Lovely, that's what it's called, the Space Act Agreement. If you hear me say SAA, that's what I'm talking about. It depends on the type of partnership to develop, and we'll talk about specific types of SAAs in an upcoming chart as well. Quincy also mentioned CRADAs. We use those, but not quite as much as a lot of the other agencies because we do have the SAAs. But a lot of the other federal labs use this when they're really targeting these R&D projects and things where you're looking at tech transfer. One of the cool things about OTAs also has to do with the intellectual property aspect and the software licensing. If you typically develop a contract with NASA and the IP belongs to NASA because that's part of the activity. But with these OTAs, there is flexibility in terms of being able to maintain the IP that's developed during the actual activity and the partnership. This also allows these partners to develop products based on NASA innovations. And there are these software user agreements that are also part of the OTA. And NASA even has a catalog out there. It's a clickable link on all these blue things, as Quincy mentioned, are clickable links that send you right to those types of activities where you can see all the different software that's available that you can use as part of the OTAs. Then also the final piece of the OTA example is under the academic and STEM education partnerships. We'll talk more about that. Lots of good activities there. In fact, there's open solicitation I want to bring to your attention under that area. So primarily the Space Act agreements or SAAs have three different types. The non-reimbursable agreement, which is the most popular, especially when dealing with colleges and universities, is where the purpose is both beneficial to NASA as well as the private entity. The funding, typically no exchange of funds. Each party bears its own costs. There is no competition for this. These are things where you find an agency that you can partner with or a center that you can partner with. There's no competition, actually collaborations where both parties contribute expertise, data, or facilities. And so a lot of times we don't think about the facilities piece of that, but that's something out there as well. Another type is a reimbursable agreement. This is where the activity primarily benefits the partner. So that means if it's benefiting the partner and NASA's not getting much benefit out of it, then NASA expects some reimbursement in terms of funding. The partner actually reimburses NASA for all or part of the cost. You can see why that was not quite as used as much as the non-reimbursable type. But this is a case a lot of times an entity might need a NASA wind tunnel or a testing facility where it's specifically benefiting the partner. Then there's a funded Space Act agreement. Now, these do require full and open competition. So this is where NASA would announce these as opportunities to get funded from the partner would actually receive funding, and NASA transfer these funds to the partner to achieve a specific agency goal. So these are open through some type of solicitation. You compete for that, and then you can actually win that particular solicitation. But since the non-reimbursable is mostly used with the SAs with universities, let's concentrate on that one to start with. So this is, like I said, the most common type of partnership with colleges and universities is the non-reimbursable. This is not even subject to full and open competition, but there are some rules in terms of SAA fairness guidelines that are actually pretty cool when you look at them. I'm actually going to talk about those in a subsequent slide as well. But these are designed to foster this collaboration and innovation in the space exploration and research and allows NASA to really work with the university on a non-reimbursable basis, meaning, NASA doesn't fund the projects, but we do provide some support. I sometimes still say we, even though I retired from NASA, it's still me, and I'm still part NASA. And it enables NASA to engage with these universities and other organizations to advance research, workforce development, educational engagement, all types of different things. And it says here in support of space exploration, but it's also in support of aeronautics, and other pieces of NASA as well, in addition to national security. Next slide. So let's talk about those guidelines a little bit. So even though these aren't competed, they don't want this to be something that's not fair to all entities. So NASA must, to the greatest extent practicable, ensure that all non-government parties have equal access to the NASA resources. So if you see one college or university that has access to this, you should have access to it too. NASA should avoid unjustifiable favoritism, whether actual or perceived, in dealing with potential partners. So again, if you've got these Space Act agreements, and we'll talk about how you can see which ones are out there, then you could have something designed very similar that leverages those same resources. If you can show your value proposition, and that's the key, you have to be familiar with what you offer to be able to offer these in the same type of capacity. These should be issued to the greatest extent practicable on a non-exclusive basis, which is typically what happens, and NASA must utilize a competitive selection process and make a public announcement if this is an exclusive arrangement. So if NASA says, I only want to deal with this particular entity, then they have to do a public announcement, kind of an open competition to make sure that that entity provides the maximum value to the agency. So that's why most of the time, we don't do all that. It's just non-exclusive. Everybody gets a chance to compete. Or not compete, everybody gets a chance to participate. So NASA must publicly disclose on the NASA website and make available in a searchable format each Space Act agreement, including an estimate of committed NASA resources and the expected benefits to the agency objectives for each agreement. So that link there actually sends you to a website that has all the current NASA Space Act agreements. And we'll give some examples of that. So this is what you see on the site. You can kind of see it's kind of small there, but you can actually go to the link in real time. But you can see the list of agreements, both domestically as well as with foreign entities. And you click on that, and you can go to a specific list of different things. I actually put these two as examples because they were the last two Space Act agreements I actually led while I was at the agency. It's really small, but one was with Hispanic Heritage Foundation, and one was with the NAACP. They both were trying to get some relationships with NASA. And I was glad to be the point of contact and actually led those developments. And I'll show a little bit more that we can read on the next slide. So with any Space Act agreement, you actually have an umbrella agreement, which is like the top level agreement that talks about the overall authorities, the purpose. You can see there on the right, it talks about the responsibility to schedule milestones, financial obligations. This particular one, everybody did their own thing. So this is not something which is non-reimbursable. It's non-exclusive. Liability, is covered as well. The IP was said, hey, this particular one has rights that remain with the inventing party. So this is a case where anything that's developed under this by either of the parties gets to be the patent rights get to be remain with that particular party. And also the points of contact. So one of the key things that you can see when you go to these sites is the fact that you can see who's on the NASA side, their phone number, email, et cetera, and also who's on the other side. So it might be a potential partnership either with NASA or the other entities. So you have those points of contact are provided for each of the Space Act agreements. And this particular one was a 9-page umbrella document. So the umbrella, as it sounds, it provides a top level description of the partnership. But what NASA found was when you just had these umbrellas without an annex, people would just have an umbrella and actually don't do anything. So with each umbrella, you had to have at least one annex, which provides a specific thing that you want to do with NASA. And it talks details of that. And these annexes are typically about 4 pages, but you can see not a lot of difficult information. And it's not like you can't just copy and paste into another document and customize it into what the opportunity of the agreement would look like for your particular college or university. So lots of similar language in a lot of these particular agreements. So what's the process of even getting to that SAA? So each of the 10 centers, and there are 10 NASA centers, has a partnerships office. So they're kind of a office that concentrates on developing these partnerships, and they aren't going to necessarily connect you with the person who is going to be doing the technical aspect of things or the day-to-day aspect, but they can help guide you through that process in terms of, how to make sure you have the optimum opportunity to get this agreement in place. And so each center has a little bit different process, but typically it starts with the title of the project. So you should already identify who the researcher or who the lab or the facility that you desire to actually have the partnership with in mind before you reach out to the partnership office. So that's done again after you look at the SAA database and you can say, oh, I really think this person might have something that I want to partner with. Reach out to that person, get some dialogue going, and actually develop an opportunity to see if this is something that you're going to take to the partnership office. So that would already have done before reaching out to the partnership office. But again, you can see some background information, type of organization, et cetera. And description of why that particular NASA center is an essential part of the partnership, and then what you offer in terms of benefiting NASA as a result of the collaboration. So you want to have thought through this process and kind of gotten things down, had some initial discussions with the particular partner at the particular center before reaching out to the partnership agreement office and filling out this information. But then you have the statement of work and a few milestones. And then the partnership office reviews and determines the appropriate type of agreement. But again, most of the situation with this background information, you can have it set up so it's pretty much obvious that this should be like a non-reimbursable agreement or whichever type that you feel is appropriate. So one thing that would help you also is determine these um, areas of emphasis. Each of the 10 centers publicizes what their primary areas of emphasis are. So you can kind of look at these areas and say, oh, this particular center is working in materials. That's one of the key areas that I would like to concentrate on. So you can kind of concentrate on space side agreements from that particular center or in that particular area and help narrow down some of the particular opportunities and how to reach out to the different centers. You can see there that the nasa.gov/partnership site is where you can get to this and actually drill down and get even more information on these particular opportunities. So one of the things I do want to talk about too is this NASA STEM engagement funding opportunity that's out there. Is currently the deadline is May 22nd. This is from MURP, which is the Minority University Research and Education Project. And this is one of the things that, even though it still has minority in the name, it's actually got funded pretty well. If you look on that chart, I think it's so many $million. I can't, kind of small on my screen. You can see that. 16 million, 18 million dollars that's allotted for these particular awards. And there's a solicitation that's currently due where the MURP is seeking proposals for minority serving institutions to promote research collaborations with NASA mission directorates, funding up to $50,000 per award, and supports teams from the universities, colleges, and community colleges designated as MSIs to develop innovative ideas and action plans for commercialization. So lots of opportunity there. In fact, on the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit more detail about these particular research proposals they're looking for. These are competitive awards. Since you get money, this is not the non-reimbursable type I was talking about before. This is something where you can actually even get multi-year cooperative agreements. And their collaboration between the several of the mission directors, you can see here, Space Operations Mission Directorate, that's the Artemis folks, is one of the sponsors for this. So they're putting money into the pot as well. Aeronautics research, as we talked about, that's the first A of NASA. And then there's a NASA Community College Aerospace Scholars activity and the Space Technology Mission Directorate, which is the technology piece. So these are actually mission directorate along with the folks in the STEM engagement area who are really looking to collaborate with other entities because, as I mentioned in the last discussion we had on the work-based learning last week, NASA is shifting a lot of focus to the high school, college, community college realm. So they've got a lot of funding that they're trying to really build these cooperative agreements with these various entities. So you can see the link that you'll have on the presentation to take you to that, and you can get more information on the specific proposal opportunities for MURP. So I encourage you to don't just go blindly in, but make sure that you look at what your focus areas are. We'll talk about this from your college or university, and then be able to kind of target where you're going after with various proposal opportunities. And this is an activity that I actually learned about back when I was at the White House, Federal Laboratory Consortium. It's part of the Lab to Market activity, which is one of the few things over at the White House Office of Science Technology Policy that has lasted regardless of who the administration was, because it's totally about how do you maximize the benefit to the overall nation from the federal labs. And this has to do a lot with tech transfer, looking for partnership opportunities. So this Federal Laboratory Consortium, FLC as they're called, you can see the link there, gives a lot of the information that's needed to help fully utilize these federal resources. So you can do things like accessing the state-of-the-art facilities, licensing federally developed technologies to build your business or college programs, the university programs, and collaborate with the lab to improve your product. So lots of good information there, including their mission, vision, core values. I do want to flag that they're having their national meeting May 12th through 14th, so it's still not too late to register for that. And that's an opportunity to actually meet these folks firsthand from multiple agencies. They come together once a year to talk about, some of their strategies, how are they going to innovate more effectively, how they can actually partner with entities such as colleges and universities. So you have firsthand be able to get engagement opportunities there if you're available at that time frame. Um, some of the things they have too, in terms of events, are kind of interesting. If you can't make the national meeting, including some of the virtual events, like that intersection of AI, quantum, and cybersecurity. If you register for that, you can see that's actually a virtual event. So some things you don't have to even go on travel to participate in. So I wanted to make sure you know that's a resource out there. It has lots of good information from multiple agencies in terms of collaborations and partnerships. And they typically use CRADAs as one of the mechanisms, because they all aren't like NASA that had the SAAs, but they do have the CRADAs, as Quincy mentioned earlier in her portion of the presentation. So before we leave, we just want to say, this whole thing about partnerships, and we talked about the workplace opportunities for students should be part of your overall strategy, really focusing on the growth areas of your program. So you shouldn't just go blindly in, shotgun and stuff, but how do you make sure that you really target activities, target these partnerships that can help you build relationships and build your program, really leveraging the capabilities and the expertise at the various entities, whether that's NASA or other federal agencies or even other partners who might have similar desires and like mindsets as you do. Really looking for ways to diversify that portfolio, right? Because any good strategy is not focused just on one area, because if that area gets cut, then what you're going to do, you're going to go down to. So how do you make sure that you can develop this strategy that helps diversify your overall portfolio and really identify these benefits to all parties? Because any good partnership, both parties need to see the benefit, or else it's usually not going to last too well. So you have to really be clear in terms of being able to communicate what your value proposition is for the other partnering agency, and also identify what you'd like to get for them to be able to maybe communicate that most effectively. So I think we really appreciate you joining us. You can see our contact information there. Of course, the links to the QEM events page, the Heroes webpage with all our other Heroes Fellows, a great group. And then we definitely ask you to give us feedback on this webinar, and we'll open it up for questions.
Thank you very much.
And thank you so much, Ken and Quincy, for such an information-rich presentation. We have one request in the Q&A. Can you share that HBCU federal contracting playbook in the chat?
In the chat,
A
yeah.
link to it, yeah.
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat.
Thank you so much.
You're
And
welcome.
we have the Q&A box open. You can also raise your hand to be taken off mute to ask a question live. We have one question from Lena Arnold in the Q&A. Can you provide some examples of non-reimbursable support NASA provides?
Sure. So let's just talk about the example I had up there with the Hispanic Heritage Foundation. So they were looking to Hispanic Heritage Foundation was looking to partner with NASA on a non-reimbursable basis, which meant that NASA didn't have to wasn't going to create new programs for HHF, but what they did was they provide links to additional opportunities that they might not have been aware of, or making sure that we had more attendance at NASA events from this diverse party. So you can imagine NASA does all these activities, but a lot of times they aren't fully participating in because people didn't know about them. So the idea is a win-win situation where NASA gets more participants from diverse groups, like Hispanic Heritage Foundation has their full community of folks, students who are participating in their activities. Uh, HSF gets some benefit because NASA already provides these opportunities, and NASA gets benefit because we get more students actually participating in programs that were already going to be going on, already had been funded. But typically, there's still some NASA resources, such as personnel, that are involved. So even though it's non-reimbursable, it doesn't mean that NASA's not going to have to spend some money to make it happen. So they might have to pay some of the folks who are already on the the payrolls, say, to actually participate and help guide the process, make sure that the interfaces with HHF go well and HHF knows what's happening. So it typically might be a monthly type meeting, but this is something that's not paid for by HHF. HHF, on the other hand, also has resources that they're going to have to provide, right? But they're covering their costs, NASA's covering its costs. So even though it's non-reimbursable, it doesn't mean that they don't put effort into making sure that the partnership's successful. So non-reimbursable just means that each entity covers its own cost associated with the partnership. And it could be the same for facilities too. Say if you wanted to use a NASA, we'll say a wind tunnel, even though it's not a lot of a demand for wind tunnels these days. NASA, if it sees value in the results or the particular model that you're testing, say a university could develop a particular model to put in the wind tunnel. NASA wouldn't pay for the cost of the development of the model, but NASA would cover the cost of running the wind tunnel. The partner, on the other hand, would actually cover the cost of building the model, and then they would both get benefit by the data that's produced after the model to run in the particular wind tunnel. So two kind of examples there.
And we have a question from Dr. April Erickson. Can you share what is the average time to put a partnership agreement in place?
Yes. And it's interesting because the first umbrella agreement can take weeks to get in place, maybe a month. Of course, a lot of the legwork is done prior to, getting to the bottom line and having an agreement that's reviewed because typically both parties have their legal counsel review the agreement, and that can take a couple of days or a week. But the good thing about it from the NASA side, when you use something that's already kind of a template from a previous Space Act agreement, you can know, hey, this is not something NASA hasn't seen. So that helps the time be reduced dramatically when you aren't just kind of customizing from scratch. So the two agreements that I did with HHF and NAACP basically had the same language, had the same bottom line cost from the NASA side of things. So that made the second one go like in a week versus the month it was taken. So the good thing about it, the more you do of these, the more you get that process refined. But it can go from a month, and that's pretty quick for the government, if I had to say. So,
And I think it also, you should include and think about the time that it takes to get to the point where you're ready to have the agreement, right? So there's a relationship that you develop with the organization where you can, spend some time talking through all of those, particulars or generalities and then particulars that then you would take the time to actually put the agreement in place.
yeah, that's a great point. And in fact, that's where we talk about these conferences and opportunities to interface with the folks who are potential partners, so they aren't just hitting them cold out the blue with this particular partnership opportunity. The other key piece of that, when we're talking about short time frames, that's usually the non-reimbursable types. If you're talking something where reimbursable has to be competed, not competed, but where it's open competition, where they open it up to others, that process can take multiple months to actually just get through the process of getting in solicitations and getting through that. So the shorter timeframes are for non-reimbursable types.
Once again, please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A tool or raise your hand to be taken off mute to ask a question or make a comment.
I will say in general, if anyone has questions about it and would like to talk offline about specific the idea for partnership, I know I'm available. I'm sure Quincy is as well to be able to provide some um, actual, assistance in developing the concept and that type of thing. So.
Once again, I want to thank our presenters today and thank you all for joining us. We hope to see you at a future QEM event, and we look forward to seeing you maybe next week. We have Lisa Getzard in the Q&A. We have interest with JPL, NASA Community College Aerospace Scholars, and our dual credit high school students in Charleston, South Carolina for our NSPE, SWE, WIA, CHSWIT. Can you extend any guidance?
Yeah, it's a lot of acronyms there. Sound like NASA. I would love to talk with you. In fact, a little bit maybe more offline if we could to get more details of specifically what you're looking to do. I know JPL is has a lot of things since it's not quite like the other agencies, other centers, because JPL is a federally funded research lab. But be glad to offer some advice on that. So would love to talk with you in more detail about the specific opportunity.
Can you put your either put your stuff in the chat or pull that slide back up so that they can get your email?
Yeah. One slide back.
I'll just put your email in the chat.
Okay. And if the last person asks a question, if they want to come off mic and just say a little bit more about what they're looking to do, if we have time, we'd be glad to try to.
She's got a statement in the Q&A. She's given you her email address, and she says we have a paper published with JPL robotics team members. Lisa, are you able to provide a link to that article in the chat? If not, that's okay. You and
Yeah, we'll
Ken can
connect.
communicate.
Yeah, we'll connect and have a follow-up. In fact, I can try to send you something right after this meeting, reach out to you.
And we have a raised hand from Dr. Gregory Davis. Greg, you can come off mute.
Well, I've been wanting to ask this question for a few days now of a NASA professional. Doesn't have to do with funding, but I watched the flyby from Artemis going past the moon, and they had this bright shining light into the capsule from Earth, and they had to use a T-shirt to cover a window. And on the one hand, that sounds like really cool astronaut stuff, and on the other hand, it's like, wait, why didn't they know this was coming and have a shade? And I'm just really curious what the NASA folks think.
You know, Greg, this is just my perspective. I think NASA tries to think of every scenario, but during the mission, things come up that, oh, this is a little bit brighter than what we thought it was going to be, you know, and so you kind of get resourceful there, and you have to be very careful with what you put near any of the windows, as you can imagine. So even the T-shirt that they used had to be several inches off of the window to make sure it was placed in an appropriate place. So I think that I'm sure some folks on the ground that went through all types of things and said, what do we have already up there that would be good for a shade that wouldn't have any chance of causing any negative effects? T-shirt must have come out with the winning answer on that. But I guarantee in the future, that's one of the reasons that this is a test flight. You know, they've went into to see these types of things. So that as they look at this, there's an opportunity now for somebody to develop a shade in the future that could be multi-purpose instead of the T-shirt. So that's part of the test flight as you come up with things. And hopefully then that's the type of thing that they recover from pretty easily. But sometimes things come that can be even more challenging than just providing shade. So great question, though.
All right, thanks.
Well, thanks everyone. We really encourage you to fill out the questionnaire. How do we make these better? What other topics would you like for us to talk about? You know, because I've got some thoughts in terms of prizes and challenges, all kinds of things that are kind of relevant in this realm that we didn't have time to discuss today, but really want to focus on things that would be maximum value to you all as participants. So, love to hear from you.
Once again, thanks so much to our presenters and our participants today, and we will see you at a future QEM webinar. Thank you so much. Have a great
Thank
day.
you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.